Welcome to What It Takes. I'm Tom Landon. When most of us think of Goodwill, we probably think first of the stores, where we can find recycled goods at a bargain price. We might also think of the jobs the organization provides to those who may need help learning the skills needed to achieve financial independence. Goodwill Industries of the Valleys is a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping people with disabilities and disadvantages overcome barriers to employment. My guest today is Stephanie Hoer, Vice President of Mission Services at Goodwill. She's going to help us better understand all of the other things the organization does every day. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Tom.
So, just to continue on what I just was talking about, when you talk to Goodwill, about Goodwill to people, what are some of the other things you hope that they learn you do?
Sure. So you talk about the retail stores, and indeed most people, when they think of Goodwill, they think of our retail store operations. Well, those stores are the fuel that really drive that social enterprise model and enable us to provide the programs and services to both youth, adults, and seniors throughout our entire service territory. When we look back over the last year, we were able to serve more than 60,000 people and place more than 3,000 people in jobs as a result of that operation.
So your name is the Goodwill of the Valleys. What is your service area?
Sure. So we cover 35 counties and 14 cities up and down Southwest Virginia. So we cover the New River Valley, the Roanoke Valley, the Shenandoah Valley, up through Charlottesville, and also the South Side region of the state.
So there's a lot of different things going on, different communities with different needs when you talk about the difference between Charlottesville, Roanoke.
Absolutely. And so for example, here in the city of Roanoke, one of the things that we've been focusing on is particularly targeting our efforts towards serving youth in the community. While in the Shenandoah Valley region, we are looking at developing specific programs and services that would serve the Hispanic community, as there tends to be a larger population demographic in that community. Then we also have to look at our more rural communities, say down into the New River Valleys, and identify the needs that exist in those communities and develop targeted services to address those needs.
Before we talk much more about Goodwill, I always like to get to know somebody a little bit.
Sure.
How did you end up where you are? What drew you to the kind of work you're doing now?
Oh gosh. So I'm really pleased to say I recently celebrated my 20th anniversary with the organization and started not long out of college as a case manager for Goodwill, and have truly just been given the opportunity to try a lot of different roles and explore many different aspects of the organization to where I am today. So it is my privilege and honor to lead a team of people that is very driven by the mission of the organization, and it's really an exciting work.
So Goodwill is a pretty big organization, obviously. I know it's national. I don't know if it's international or not, but I know it's a very large organization. How does your specific organization fit into sort of the ecosystem of nonprofits in the area when it comes to providing service? Sure.
Great question. So each Goodwill entity is operated autonomously. So we have our own board of directors, our own CEO. And so we look specifically again to work collaboratively with nonprofits across our service territory to determine needs and where we can address those needs. I think that we are fortunate that we have the resources through our social enterprise model to be able to address some of those needs. So our collaborative efforts may mean that we come to the table to provide the specific program, but it may also mean that we come to the table as looking at resources and being able to provide those resources as opposed to directly delivering the service.
Instead of duplicating
Absolutely.
That service. You mentioned kind of the needs of the Hispanic community in the Shenandoah Valley, especially where the poultry industry is.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the manufacturing that goes on there. How has Goodwill sort of shifted, and you've been there a long time, so have you noticed a shift in the focus of the organization or in terms of the different kinds of people who need help that you're serving?
So I think I would say more so a shift to meet the need, right? I would say probably over the last 10 or 15 years, you have seen a targeted focus on developing a robust menu of services. So particularly in our youth communities. So we have a real interest in developing a menu of youth programming that addresses the needs of youth so that by the time they become adults, they are self-sufficient, they're independent, they're productive, contributing members of society. So I think that in terms of a shift, we've been fortunate that we've been able to build out sort of our portfolio of programming to be able to offer a wide array of services. The organization it was rooted originally in providing specifically services to individuals with disabilities, and we still do that. But we also provide services to adults who have been disconnected or dislocated from work, as well as seniors.
So when we talk about youth, let's get a little more specific.
Sure.
What are some highlights? What are, something that you love to talk about when it
Sure,
comes to talking
sure.
about
So
youth?
a current collaboration that we're involved with is with the organization's TAP and the Roanoke Redevelopment and Housing Authority. And we will be launching in January a pilot program working with 20 youth. And Goodwill has come to the table to provide them with internship opportunities at our jobs campus here in the city of Roanoke. They will also be receiving services with TAP and will reside in the Housing Authority communities. And so we're really excited about being able to work with those other organizations to provide those youth with job training opportunities and expose them to different careers that perhaps maybe they haven't had exposure to before.
Like what? If a young person becomes an intern
Sure.
through your
So
program, what can they?
They could have an opportunity to intern in our marketing department. They could have an opportunity to intern and provide services to one of the programs that we deliver there at the jobs campus. So we have a career center. We have, which is open to the public, and people can come and receive training in job search or resume writing and simply have online access for job search. And so students would have an opportunity to look at the different departments that are within the organization and perhaps intern within those departments.
Good way for you also to potentially develop future employees.
Absolutely, that career pipeline, yes.
One thing I try to talk to everybody about this year, especially, is what we're all living through as an organization that sounds like a pretty high-touch organization, both in your stores but also in the services you provide. When March 10th to 13th of 2020 came around as a leader, what was that like for you?
It was definitely one of the most challenging periods in my career, as I'm sure for a lot of us out there. But I think in reflecting back on that, I am incredibly proud of the way that our organization responded. We did go through a period of time, approximately 90 days or so, when our stores were closed as a result of the pandemic. We continued to deliver services virtually to those individuals that we could continue to serve in that way.
But that's hard, right? Because a lot of the individuals you serve many are, but many of them probably are not what you would think of as being, the kind, able to readily flip that switch and go virtual.
And there were those that we weren't able to serve during that period of time, but for those that we could transition to, perhaps that were receiving classroom training, and so we could transition to a virtual model of delivering that training, we were able to do so. But you're right, there were certainly a lot that we were not able to during that period. However, very pleased to say that the organization very quickly pivoted and provided coaching services to its impacted employees. So when we had employees that were impacted by the shutdown, we developed a plan and implemented that inside of a week to be able to keep those employees connected to the organization so that when we reopened the doors, they very quickly returned to work. But in terms of really looking back over that period of time, there's a lot that we're in that. What did we learn? What do we want to take away from it today? And I think that hybrid model is something that we've definitely continued in terms of looking at ways in which we can deliver training to people both in person and virtually, and is something that we will continue to do. I think another thing that it brought forward for us was made even more clear the digital divide. right? People that didn't necessarily have access to broadband or to the computer equipment that they needed. They had a willingness and they had a know-how, but they didn't have access. So that's something as we move forward that we're continuing to look at, because that will negatively impact people if it's not addressed.
Sure, and the schools, and I spend a lot of time talking to education leaders.
Sure.
One of the things they're very focused on now is sort of this achievement gap. They're doing growth assessments to figure out what do we miss. The third graders didn't learn whatever things third graders are learning. Has that sort of thinking been a part of what you're doing too? Like the little bit, yes, you're back to providing services, but was there, is there a gap that has to be filled in?
Sure, I think across the spectrum, yes. I mean, we have adults who, did not maybe necessarily return to services because of challenges that they experienced during that time. I'm really proud of the organization to be able to say that we partnered with the United Way of the Roanoke Valley and Roanoke City Public Schools to deliver a virtual academy out of our youth center during that time, so that when schools were not open indoor or to have people in the classrooms or kids in the classroom, they were able to come to our youth center and participate virtually in their academic day. But I think certainly, and it goes back to, again, our target on youth and being able to provide services to youth that will allow them to grow up and be successful adults, and even more important given the last year and a half.
Now, I'm mostly talking about things other than the stores, but I'm just curious because I drop things off at the Goodwill all the time, right? It's a very high, I do, and it's a very high touch. A lot of people handling things, close proximity to each other. In terms of just sanitation and, mitigation measures, how has that changed for you all?
So I would say that in our stores, and maybe not the best person to answer that question, sure. I think that, I know that there were a strict protocol implemented in the stores during that time, of which they continue to operate by and following CDC guidelines.
Sure, and I think that's the thing. We've all learned things that we're carrying forward.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
It's so that, nothing good comes of, pandemic is not good. I've said this many times, but we definitely have learned things. From it. One of the things that I know you all like to emphasize is multi-generational programs.
Yes.
So we've talked a little bit about youth. How are you working with people at every stage of their lives?
Sure. So in terms of our adult programming, really it is a spectrum of services. So we have adult services that are available to individuals whose ultimate outcome is employment. So our occupational skills training, where we're matching people with in-demand training, such as the healthcare field. We recently wrapped up a service where we were providing digital skills training to individuals, all the way up to individuals who perhaps aren't necessarily seeking employment as a goal, but maybe seeking to increase their independence. So we offer community engagement services to people that can go out, participate in cooking classes, build natural supports in the community, all the way up to our older worker program. So we connect individuals who qualify as low income and are 55 and above with job training opportunities, so that they can then, if they desire, return to the workforce and perhaps have not worked for a number of years or have health conditions that may have impacted their career, and we're able to provide them with the supports and the training to re-enter the workforce.
Just the logistics of all of that, and I think you're dealing with a very varied population, it sounds like,
sure.
But it seems like one of the things that would be a big barrier is mobility, transportation, getting people from one place to another, and that may also be something you're not the person to ask about,
No,
but I'm
sure,
curious about it. So, that is just a massive barrier, I would imagine.
It is. You have hit the nail on the head. So I think transportation, as I look across our entire service territory and across our entire array of services, transportation absolutely is one of the largest barriers that we face. So in our communities where public transportation is available, one of the things that we do is may provide people with training on how to access that public transportation. And we of course serve people who drive or may have other opportunities to do that. But for those that don't, or for those that live in communities where public transportation is not available, it is absolutely a barrier. And so we see people who rely on family and peer supports to access training. It goes back to what I mentioned before too about the digital divide. And so is there an opportunity to connect with people in their homes and connect with people where they are so that that travel perhaps is not as much of a barrier? And that is certainly something that I think in the coming months and years that I hope to see that increases more.
Sure. Everybody I speak to in our current situation is, just the people that they need to do the work has been a big problem. Have you experienced difficulties in staffing and finding people to do the things that are really mission critical?
Sure. So I think, Goodwill is like all other organizations out there who are hiring right now and who are working to, fill needed roles. Absolutely. And I think we're experiencing the same challenges that other organizations are. I think one of the ways in which we have worked to address that is looking specifically at our employees and how are we supporting them. So we have put into place, ahead of the minimum wage increase, we have put into place stepped up wage increases specifically for the employees in our stores. We also will be rolling out in the coming months an employee-based model where all of our employees will have individual development plans and we'll have coaches that are working with them so that they are able to advance through their chosen career. So I think one of the ways that you address that, or one of the ways that we're trying to address that as an organization, is looking to make sure that we are fully supporting our employees and they want to stay with us.
Right, often the best employee is the one you don't have to replace.
Absolutely.
When you look at those needs, and again, maybe not the right person to ask, but feel free to tell me if that's the case, is there, when you are hiring from outside, is there a certain kind of person that you look for?
Gosh, so I think, we look for, and I'll speak to our employees for our mission programming, right? So I think I'm looking for someone who has a commitment to the mission. I'm looking for someone who has a desire to learn, who is curious. And a lot of those hard skills around the technical delivery, we can teach those, right? But I think it's those soft skills, and I think we want employees who want to be challenged, like I said, are curious. And so, we're looking for people, and we are, check out our website, and we would love to have you come apply.
Sure. Thanks for making that pitch. I want to talk about workforce development a little bit and kind of break it down a little bit. You mentioned some different areas. So in terms of healthcare,
sure.
I know there's a huge need. What's Goodwill doing to help other employers fill that need?
So we are wrapping up a program that we were the recipients of a federal award, a Good Care healthcare training program that enabled us to match individuals with barriers to occupational skills training, specifically in the healthcare field. So we're talking about certified nursing assistants, personal care aides, all the way up to our registered nurses, that all along that career pathway. Where Goodwill really steps in is providing the supports and the foundation that the people need while they're completing that training. So for example, we may have a young woman who is interested in advancing her career and seeking a higher paid skill, but she's having a hard time finding childcare. Sure. She's having a hard time finding transportation. And so we oftentimes are able to provide some of those support services so that she can focus on her training and be successful. Our organization has made a financial commitment that when that grant ends at the end of this year, we will be funding that going forward. So the healthcare training program known as Good Care with our organization will continue into next year, and I'm very proud that as an organization we are making the financial commitment to sustain that program even when those federal funds go away. And
especially, I mean, in this region with a growing healthcare industry, all of that is going to be more and more important. I know that you've also, you have some programs that help with prison reentry. We have more people incarcerated than we ought to, right? But when someone comes out, what is unique about their situation that requires?
So when you have someone who is reentering society and seeking employment, there are often barriers there that maybe we don't think about. So for example, obtaining a photo ID, right? Needing some of the basic things that we need to apply for a job. fundamental needs, having a roof over your head, having food for your family, all of the things that are basic needs in our society. So we work very closely with our local jails and prisons in order to meet the needs of those individuals as they are reentering society. And oftentimes it is the meeting of those societal needs that then contributes to their being successful in that reentry. And so we have a team through our Good Start program who connects people to job opportunities while also, again, providing that foundation so that those societal needs are met so they can focus on their employment.
So you've got people you're working with in jails and prisons who are helping you to identify people who
That's correct.
would
So
benefit?
again, sort of a common theme here is collaboration. So this isn't something that we do in a vacuum, and we have a tremendous amount of support through that system of identifying people who are going to be reentering in our service territory, right? So people who are interested and very much wanting to be successful in that next chapter of their life. And so that partnership is very important.
Yeah, I would think it's very important to catch them in that kind of liminal state where they,
Sure.
because once they're out, if they don't have those supports.
That's when certainly the risk for recidivism is greatest. And again, it has been my experience that the desire to be successful is there. It's simply giving people the opportunity and meeting those basic needs through a support network that allows them to be successful.
So both of those things we just talked about, are really a part of career training. When you all are designing what kind of careers you want to train people for, what's that process like for deciding, where should we be focusing in terms of making sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck, being the most useful?
That's a great question. And so it has to do all with those in-demand occupations. And so to your question earlier about our service territory, that really looks differently throughout our entire territory. So it's really analyzing where the individuals are living, what their career interests are, and then focusing in those in-demand occupation fields.
I know not all of the people you serve require them, but a lot of the people you serve require some accommodation by employers, right? So on the employer side, there must be a lot of work that you do to help manage expectations, but also to help employers be as supportive as they can.
Sure. So I would say specifically in one of our programs where we serve individuals with disabilities, we have employment specialists who really serve as a liaison with the employer and are working directly with the employer and the individual to determine what those accommodations may be. And it's all about, you'll hear the term natural supports, allowing someone to be the most successful in their environment with those built-in natural supports. I have natural supports in my work environment, but it's not necessarily something that we talk about in terms of saying, there's, every, lunchtime I'll take a break and go outside and walk in the sun for 10 minutes. Those things that sort of help us, refuel or recharge. And so those exist in everyone's environment, but it's an opportunity to be intentional about determining what that is that will help that person to be the most successful.
Well, and I think just in the last, let's say 10 years, but maybe 20 years, 30 years, the idea of accommodations, the idea that we all have some special needs.
Yes.
I am just like you. I can't work. I can't go outside a couple times a day. Sometimes I need a snack.
Absolutely. Snacks are important.
Sometimes I check a website or two just to keep, kind of refresh my
Absolutely.
my own.
So it happens in all of our work environments. And I think that, so in this case, we're just being deliberate about acknowledging what those are and what that is. And I think, again, it doesn't have to be something that is set aside. It's built into what we all do every day.
Have you found, maybe I'm wrong here, have you found that over time that the idea of providing accommodations has become a little more normal for employers?
I would say yes. That's a great question, and I would say yes. I think that it is about education, and it's about not only the education of our employers, but also the education of our community members around advocacy. So self-advocacy and speaking up when we need an additional support to be successful. And so to answer your question, I think yes, I think it has improved over the years.
I think all of us are maybe many of us are maybe a little more willing to admit that we have weaknesses at the beginning. It's come up in job interviews and things, I know.
Sure.
Is there coaching that goes on with your clients to help
sure.
them advocate for themselves?
Across the board, yes. And I think that that is an important part of not only professional development, but career development, because the self-advocacy piece is we know what we need to be successful. And so, yes, that is certainly a part of what we do across the board.
I as someone who's employed people before, hired people before, it's always so helpful if somebody tells me right off the bat, here's what you need to know about me.
Right, right. Absolutely, absolutely. And not being afraid to say those things, right? And so I think that has, the environment for that has certainly improved.
And do you find that in all industry, like, there's manufacturing and there's healthcare, are there some places where you need to do more coaching of the employers?
I wouldn't necessarily say that there's a particular industry where that is the case. I think the demands of the job, of course, differ. And so that really would be on a case-by-case basis.
Sure. We have about a minute left.
Okay.
Time flies. When you've been with the organization for, you said, I think 20 years, and when you look ahead at the mission, because you're the mission person, how do you see that evolving over time in the next 10, 20 years?
Gosh, so I think that, long term out, I think, again, we will be certainly focusing on a multi-generational service delivery. And so really looking at serving from our youth to our older workers. And I think that is something that where we are headed in the coming, say, 1 to 5 years. And I see that probably only intensifying, along with customizable services to individuals across our service territory.
Right. I think as we go forward, employment needs are going to only be greater for
Absolutely.
employers, especially based on
Sure.
demographics. Well, as we close the program, I would like to encourage you to visit the Goodwill website at goodwillvalleys.com to learn more about all the things we've talked about today. Stephanie, I want to just thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Great. For What It Takes, I'm Tom Landon.